Here we are in another LT1 10-speed build. What more can we say? This is pretty much top of the line in my opinion in the engine conversion world. This is a late model JK. Got a lot of stuff in it. We're not running an Atlas in this one. We're running a 241J, which works fine. A lot of guys think you have to have an Atlas to go off-road, but you don't. It's nice to have it, but it's not a requirement. You know, guys, Jeeps become almost like a lifestyle for a lot of guys and girls. If you look at all the stuff in these Jeeps, and I don't even know what a lot of this stuff is, but literally they've got probably more money into all these accessories than they do into the purchase of the vehicle. And each Jeep is individualized, so what you do to your Jeep is going to be different than what I do to my Jeep. Suspension systems, armor, fenders, what tire size do you need? And let's talk about tire size a second, because I get that question a lot. For me, 35s are about the biggest standard street tire. They do well off-road. Of course, you're not going to be going through the hardest trails, climbing rock waterfalls with 35s like you would if you had 40s. But 35 is a lighter tire, less load on the powertrain and brakes. So 35 is a really good compromise for guys that just want to lightly wheel and have good on-road performance. 40s, on the other hand, are probably a requirement if you're going to be doing some really hardcore stuff. If you're going to be out there fording streams or climbing rock faces, 40s are pretty much mandatory. The downside to the 40s, obviously, is you're going to be using more gas. The modern 40s have come a long way. They're relatively quiet on the street. They're not like the old days, and of course that depends on which one you get. But I've been doing some long distance driving with 40s, and they're very manageable on the highway these days. You are going to suffer the price of replacing your brake pads more often. In fact, with 40s, if you're going to be doing any kind of performance driving or off-road, you should upgrade your brakes. And that's a good point that we should talk about. What brakes should we get? All the time I get guys calling me, hey, I put in this big giant caliper from Wheelwood or from so-and-so, and now my pedal goes to the floor, and they're telling me that that's normal. It still stops fine, but I'm nervous because the pedal is soft. Well, that's what's going to happen if you put a large volume caliper with a stock master cylinder. So you could go to one of the aftermarket master cylinders. Probably one of the best is the Mopar, because it's inexpensive and it works well, the JK8 master cylinder booster combination. And that'll get you a lot of your pedal feel back. I'm a big fan of the larger rotor or the caliper offset bracket set. A lot of guys think, well, that's not as good as a big caliper, and maybe it's not, but it's a lot less expensive, and by pushing those calipers out on that rotor and putting a larger rotor in, you're getting more leverage. And you're not changing the volume of the calipers, so your brake pedal feel is the same. You can get front and rear and significantly improve your braking for a lot less money than going to a big brake or big caliper setup. If you do upgrade your brakes and you open the system, it's a good idea to do what's called a scan bleed. Basically, you put the ABS module into a mode that bleeds the hydraulic control unit. It takes two guys to do it, but make sure you have the ability to do it. Most quality scanners today can do a scan bleed. Moving on from the brakes is suspension, and suspension is just such a big category that it's impossible to talk about all the different combinations. What I would say is base your suspension on your need. If you never go off-road, if all you do is street drive and mall crawl, don't go out and buy yourself a double throwdown or whiz-bang high-dollar suspension system. You're just wasting your money. Those systems work excellent for what they do. They have a lot of flex, they have a lot of stability. I am not a suspension expert, but I've driven pretty much everything that's out there, and what I can tell you is you have to buy suspension that meets your driving need. If you go out and spend a ton of money on a pre-runner setup, a $50,000 chassis with axles, and you got it set up to go across Baja at 100 miles an hour, that same system is not going to give you the ride quality you want on road. I find for the average guy, a good 3.5-inch system with 35 to 37s, and the trend today is to keep the center of gravity low. So I'm seeing guys on 40s with 3.5-inch suspensions, or even 2.5 with really high-line fenders. And I am a big fan of that because it keeps that center of gravity low and it makes your Jeep handle better. The cost is a big factor. The low-line suspension systems made in China, are probably not going to give you the best ride. They have a single rate spring. They don't have a variable rate spring or a dual rate spring. Their bushings are probably not as good as the higher end systems. Their control arms are probably heavier, but you get what you pay for. Now, if you go into the midline systems like Metal Cloak, Rock Crawler, those guys, that's where most of you are going to be. Look for a suspension system that has a good joint. If you want a serviceable joint, get it. I like non-serviceable joints like the Metal Cloak Duraflex joint. It's made out of rubber, so it absorbs shock better, like tar strips on the road, and it lasts for a long, long, long time without having to service it. I'm really not a big fan of greasing joints. It's kind of a messy job, and I find that those joints do tend to wear out rather quickly compared to the rubber joints. Now, of course, if you've got to go out and flex and do some of the crazy things guys are doing, maybe a Johnny joint or a Cleveite is what you need. But what I need for my Jeep is something that rides good, lasts a long time, is quiet, and doesn't break the bank. The last couple of months I've had a couple of test drives that just required a lot of extra work, and mostly because guys have death wobble or they have torque steer and bump steer. I've got a couple in the shop right now that when you hit a bump you change lanes. If you flip your drag link and you go to a high steer, you've got to counteract that with your track bars. Those track bars need to run in the same arc as the drag link, and when they don't, you're going to have a problem. So I see all this stuff going on where guys are mixing and matching suspension components. Have it done right. The best thing to do is to buy a complete suspension system from a manufacturer that has engineered it as a package. If you use one part from one guy and another part from another guy, you might have an issue. So a big part of the test drive is not just testing the engine, it's feeling out the chassis. And I can tell you, when you go from 250 horsepower to 450 horsepower, it makes a big difference in chassis dynamics, and we have to be careful of that. And then there's just everything else. I mean, we've got stereos and tablets and electronic devices. I don't know what they are. So you can go through a catalog and get whatever you want. There's everything you want out there. Personally, I think some of these Jeeps are over-accessorized. Guys are just getting stuff they don't need because it looks cool or their friend got it, whatever. Because we've talked about this combination so many times before, let's hit the mountain with it, get some video, and then we'll be talking about accessories in upcoming videos. And we've got the LT5 build going. We've got some really cool stuff going. I'll see if I can get an in-shop video. I know a lot of you guys like those. So we're gonna hit the trail and we'll see you in the next video.